Welcome to Some Like It Classic. I'm your host, Tammy Govea. Margot Gerber is a driving force behind the Los Angeles preservation movement and the executive director of the Art Deco Society here in Los Angeles. We are thrilled to have her here to talk all things Art Deco. Welcome, Margot.
Thank you, Tammy. This is very exciting.
It is very exciting for me, for Art Deco Society, for the Art Deco movement, and hence this conversation today. When I was thinking, it's kind of popped in my head the first time Art Deco became a thing for me in my life. And it was introduced to me through classic film. And when I think about some of my favorite films are the Thin Man series.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting goosebumps because it's just literally a cinematic moment introducing the era, but really introducing to me Art Deco in the furniture and, and fashion and the architecture. So I've kind of gone through my life loving Art Deco, but never really delving into the who, why, where, when, what of it. So one of the reasons I was excited about having this conversation with you is I want you to put on your historian hat for me and talk about what is Art Deco.
Oh, that is a loaded question. Art Deco is a style that became really prevalent not only in architecture, but in pretty much all the everyday objects that people were using in the late 20s and through the 30s. They Art Decoized things like toasters, cars, graphics that you would just have in a magazine that you would have already subscribed to, but by the 20s it was very Art Deco looking. So it's a very geometric and angular style that you can really incorporate into anything from fashion. I like to say from toasters to textiles, because it really just infused like all design, and no other style has really ever done that on such a global scale. And part of that was because in 1925, the Exposition of Decorative and Industrial Arts that happened in Paris, they made it a mandate that the architects and artists that participated use a modern style. So they didn't want people to harken back to any of the classical styles that had been popular for centuries, literally, but they wanted them to do something new. And already people were experimenting in these more stripped down styles that were completely the antithesis of the Edwardian and the Victorian eras. But by the time this expo happened, we were seeing what later became known as Art Deco or international style. And this was a style that really focused on the geometry of a building and not all of the decorative details, even though a lot of Art Deco is pretty decorative.
It is. But what's fascinating about the design for me is, though there's a sharpness to it, there's such a beautiful fluidity. The edges, it all just marries so beautifully together. Why do you think, to your point, this style has lasted for as long as it has?
Art Deco is phenomenal in that way. And at this point, I think it just denotes like a timeless elegance. Like if you look at the Oscar telecasts over the past like 5, maybe more years, they've come back to this sort of Art Deco influenced style. And I think that now it's a shorthand to say this is something elegant and it's something timeless. So I don't think it's going to go away. The only time it was kind of canceled in the culture was right after World War II, when all of the styles that predated World War II were considered outmoded. People really wanted to have a fresh start, and that's when you see the mid-century architecture becoming prominent. But then in the late 60s, a man named Bevis Hillier, who was a British journalist, wrote a book making a case for the fact that this style was kind of a timeless thing in the world of art and architecture, and that we should pay attention to it again. And then after that revival, it just never really went away completely. We had artists like Nagel that were trying to do something in an Art Deco style in the 80s. Erte, who is really considered the father of Art Deco illustration, was still alive into the early 90s. So his work was still being produced and licensed, and it was becoming very ubiquitous in certain circles. So those kinds of things help to keep the style perpetuated. And now, with the onset of electronic graphic design, you see that you can actually get packages of Art Deco embellishments and Art Deco fonts. And so it's not going anywhere.
Well, to your point, institutions and people continuing to ensure that the Art Deco movement stays alive, we've got the Art Deco Society of LA. Art Deco's been a part of your life for a very long time. I'm sure before you began your work with the Art Deco Society LA. How did that journey start? Because you've worked in publicity. I mean, you've had your fingers in many pies over the years. How did you segue into working with ADSLA?
Film publicity and marketing, specifically for theatrical, so films that were in theaters, festivals. I worked for many years for the nonprofit American Cinematheque, dealing with, I got to promote some of the best films ever, a lot of classic movies, pedigreed films from different countries, new independent films. So I do apply a lot of that to my work with the Art Deco Society. But the Art Deco Society had always been like the place where I went to play and enjoy in my spare time. I never thought it was going to become a job. So I was a vintage clothing enthusiast and historic styles, like literally since I was a child. And I used to go to something called the Vintage Fashion Expo that was at the sadly shuttered Santa Monica Civic Center. And that went on for decades. And I guess I must have in those days picked up some kind of a flyer or something about the Art Deco Society. So the first event that I ever attended was a vintage fashion show in the Bullocks Wilshire Tea Room when it was still iMagnon. It was still a department.
Yes. Wow.
And I was just like over the moon. Like I'd never see, I didn't have others that I could share this with. People put up with me buying old clothes, but I didn't have other friends that were involved in it. So I just thought it was the greatest thing. And then I casually attended some things and then sort of lost track of the Art Deco Society for a while. But somehow I reconnected with it in 1998 because I was producing a big gala reopening for the Egyptian Theater on Hollywood Boulevard after it had undergone an extensive renovation. And I wanted to have some people come and sort of dress the part and be involved in a vintage fashion parade. And I reached out to the Art Deco Society. And then after that, I started to know some of the people and I sat on the events committee. Went to a World Congress in New York, I think around 2005, and then eventually joined the board. So I sort of rose into the position of having it take over my life. I was the president starting in 2017, and I was working full time, very demanding job, was kind of administering to the Art Deco Society at nights and at odd hours. But I couldn't get through everything I wanted to do because I just didn't have the time. So I made the decision after the pandemic, after working in the movie theater business during the pandemic, that I really did not want that to be the end of my career because it was just kind of sadly a dying industry. And around that time, I was terming out as president. So the board was very generous to take on my plan to be the first paid executive director. And I did that part-time until last month when I became a full-time employee, and just raging to go with all the plans that I have for the future.
Well, you certainly picked, well, I don't know if you picked it, but the stars aligned because this year is such a special time. for Art Deco. Before we get into the Centennial celebration, which is all the fun stuff that's going on, I want to talk a little bit about clearly something that's near and dear to your heart and to mine as well, and that's preservation. And, you know, when I first became a member of Art Deco Society LA, I really honestly did not have any idea that preservation was truly at the forefront of in the mission statement of our, you know, ADSLA, and the work that you've done over the years for Los Angeles monuments or buildings to ensure that they're protected and that they're honored. I was doing a little bit of research and came across a LA Weekly interview that you did. This is, I believe, back in 2018. And you were quoted as saying, Los Angeles is increasingly controlled by developers and our skyline is changing drastically. So this was back in 2018. My question is, today, what did that influence from developers look like?
The pandemic was definitely a time when one of the essential activities that could continue was development and construction. So if you drove around the city, you saw that that was still going on. But at the same time, a lot of projects kind of fell through because of the economy and everything. But the city has changed just in these 5 years. There have been a lot of demolitions, especially of small residences. So this is a moment where we're at a tipping point in terms of what historic buildings are going to last on our landscape. And I'm a big proponent of something called adaptive reuse, where you take a building that was built for a certain purpose, like a department store, and like Southwestern Law School did, you convert the Bullocks-Wilshire building into your law library and administrative offices. And they did a very sensitive job with it, because when you go into the library, you can still see some of the artworks that were originally part of the fabric of the building. There's mosaics and there's paintings and things on the walls, reliefs. So that can be done. Developers will often say it can't, but you can incorporate a historic building into your new development. And that is, I think, what the answer is, because yes, we probably do need more density for a growing population, but at the same time, we can save some of what was there. And we have proactively tried to go through the city's process of historic cultural monument or landmarking buildings, where anyone can do this. Actually, you don't have to be an organization. You just have to follow their guidelines, which can be a bit daunting if you've never done the research or gone into the building and safety records. But the program exists, and we have, since I became president in 2017, one of my goals was to make our preservation aspect a little bit more robust, and we have added a number of buildings to the city's historic landmark registry and even to the National Registry. But it does not mean that the building can't be torn down. A lot of people think that once it's landmarked, it's safe, it's preserved. So we do have to keep an eye on some of our buildings. About half of them are still empty, or have become empty since we landmarked them, so that anytime there's a derelict building, it's in jeopardy. It could burn down, it could become demolished by neglect. So it's very important that we kind of vigilantly keep on that.
Is there a point where a building is absolutely protected?
Not in this country.
Really?
I believe that France is the only country that has that stipulation. We've dealt with developers or building owners, I should say, that said, building means everything to me and I would never tear it down and I will protect it for the rest of my life. And then as soon as a landmark thing goes through, they've started plans to sell it. So nothing is for sure. And some of these owners in Los Angeles now with empty buildings are people who've owned the buildings for in excess of 40 years, or it's generational wealth and their father bought it in 1930 or something. So the problem is that people believe they're going to live forever, and they don't have a succession plan for their building, because buildings obviously live on much longer than we do. And so one of our mandates is to try to protect these buildings insofar as we can. But, if we had a fund and we could buy them all, then we could protect them. So it's really about who owns it as far as a longevity of protection goes.
What kind of engagement do you get from the community in response to actively protecting these buildings?
One of the things that I've taken from my marketing background is that we market our HCMs, as they're called, our historic cultural monument applications. So you can just go through the process of it and just deal with the city and not make things public. But because of social media and just the climate we're in right now, it's possible to rile people up and get people to join a coalition, sign petitions, write letters to the city. The more that the city council believes that people care about a certain building or that it's important, the more likely they are to not be influenced by an owner that is asking for it not to be landmarked for their own agenda. Building owners actually do get some benefits, tax benefits and things from having a building that has been landmarked. So it's not like a lot of people think it's a death knell for the building and, oh, we can never change it and we can't do this or that. But in fact, some of these projects are extremely successful. After the family that owned the Bob's Big Boy in Burbank went ahead and did a complete restoration of it, they became like the top grossing Bob's Big Boy because people wanted to go somewhere that was unique and had, the 50s vibe that they were looking for, the nostalgia factor. So it really can help a building as opposed to hinder it. But a lot of owners don't understand it, and the city doesn't really have the resources to educate people about it. So when you're tapped with it, it's kind of like, oh my God, you've got the plague, but really it's a good thing to landmark a building and you're eligible for assistance that you wouldn't be otherwise. And it's hard because if you're, a family that's owned a building for a long time, it is going to need upkeep and care. And that's expensive. It all comes with a price tag.
It's really encouraging to me, though, to hear that a community's voice does make a difference. And to your point, social media, a lot of people are like poo-poo on social media and it's a negative space and what have you, but you can use it for really positive things. It's all in your perspective and what's important to you. So I'm really happy to hear that because I walk the fine line of staying abreast of what's going on in the world and disengaging from all this speak. So it's really good to hear that. Very happy to hear that. When we're talking about AD Art Deco, ADSLA, there's also the global initiatives. There's also Art Deco Society is a global community, which I had no idea about. You're on the board of the International Coalition of Art Deco Societies, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like in regards to collaborating, or do you collaborate?
I think the collaboration of all the individual Art Deco societies as part of the International Coalition of Art Deco Societies has broadened now that we have electronic means of communication. This all started, a while back. So there is now, I think, about 28 Art Deco societies around the world that are members. We just had Casablanca join and Tehran. So who knew there were Art Deco in all of these places? The proliferation of Art Deco in a lot of these countries is sadly because they were colonized. And so the Western styles, became prevalent there. Like Shanghai is a city that has a proliferance of Art Deco. But it's great that we can all band together for common cause. I remember the first time I can't remember what building it was, but we had a building that was with the city for HCM consideration. And they got some international letters and they were very impressed. They're like, oh my God, people care about this building in Australia and New Zealand and the UK. So that can be extremely helpful. And truly, the large cities of the world, people who don't live there do care about the architecture. I'm sure that if somebody proposed to tear down the Eiffel Tower, there would be a worldwide outcry. So, and we have Hollywood here, where some of our buildings of the Art Deco style are located. We do a tour of it. And Hollywood is really owned by the world because people have been following what made it famous, of course, the movie industry for a century or more now. So I think that the protection of Art Deco worldwide and to have these organizations band together is a really, really strong thing. And I think ICADS will only get more, it'll get more powerful as time goes on. You know, right now we hold a World Congress every 2 years for about 200 to 300 people who come. Delegates are from the various Art Deco societies, but we're working on having some programs that can be transmitted through a platform like Zoom so that people can enjoy an international flavor of Art Deco wherever they are in the world. And we have a fair number of members that have joined from outside of the local area because they can participate in our programs now online. So that's been interesting that we have the time shift to think about and things like that. We offer recordings so that, you know, if you can't make it in person because you're 11 hours ahead or something, you could still participate.
I know recently we had that event with Arnold Schwartzman, and it was a Zoom event. And I still laugh because technology still surprises me. And here I am at an Art Deco event and it's Zoom. And there was just that moment of, right, this is actually amazing. People can see this phenomenal event with Mr. Schwartzman any time of the day, all around the world, and deservedly so. I really enjoyed that event, by the way. We are coming up, no, we are in the midst of celebrating Art Deco's 100th anniversary. My brain is a little imploding, and I can only imagine what your brain is going through trying to coordinate everything. What is Art Deco Society LA doing to celebrate?
It's a little hard to imagine that the 1920s were 100 years ago. In the antique world, if something's 100 years old, it's an antique. Before that, it's vintage. So it is kind of mind-blowing that we are finally at this 100th anniversary, which is marked by the exposition I mentioned earlier that was in Paris to showcase new design that was both decorative and industrial. And out of that, of course, grew the different types of Art Deco that we still know today. So we are very excited to do something in Los Angeles because after poking around prior to 2025, we discovered that there was no Los Angeles museum that was doing anything. So we're going to be mounting an exhibit that will be on display just for one weekend, April 26th through 28th at the Oviatt building, which is in downtown Los Angeles in the penthouse. The Oviatt is, of course, heavily influenced by the Paris exposition because the artisans who worked on it studied what had gone on there. Some of them attended, and some of the furniture was actually purchased at a department store showroom that was showcasing only the modern styles. And so a lot of the Art Deco that came to the United States came through what was being offered in that showroom, which was curated by a well-respected French designer. But it wasn't all his designs. It was a multitude of different designers. So our event is going to focus on everyday deco because, as I mentioned earlier, the style really permeated all sorts of different types of objects that people used in their daily lives. And we will also have some soirees as part of that and a crepe tea party. So there will be different types of events that you can attend over that weekend. And the tickets are on our website, artdecola.org. They just launched. We suggest getting tickets for any of the special events that weekend, like immediately, because it's a penthouse, so it's where someone lives, so it's not enormous. We can only fit about 100 people in there at a time, so we're repeating some of the events. You can attend a party on Saturday or a party on Sunday so that we can accommodate more people who want to share in this exciting celebration.
Will iPads also be holding events around the world to celebrate?
Well, one of the issues we actually have is that there are a number of Art Deco societies that are all doing events that same weekend, because that is the exact 100th anniversary, April 28th, when the expo opened in 1925. It ran for 6 months. So there is a calendar of events on the ICAD's website. So people who want to like tune into something that's being shown remotely can certainly check to see when there's events happening with other Art Deco societies. And we are launching kind of a 6-month or more, it'll probably go to the end of the year, series of lectures. We have one coming up that's about the jewelry of the expo, so what jewelry and designers were shown there. We're also going to do one on French perfume history with some opportunities to smell perfumes and to even blend some perfume. And we're going to do something on automotive French design from the period. So there's a number of opportunities to learn more about the exposition. We will also do a lecture that's specifically on the exposition so people can understand what went on there and who was involved.
I love that. Remind people where, for ICAD, what's the website?
So the website for the overall coalition, the international coalition, is icadsdeco.org.
Okay. And I'll make sure and include that, in the hashtags and what have you.
And that's the calendar that will be providing the organizations posted their events. Like, we haven't posted our event in there yet, so we need to. And then our website is artdecola.org. We have a link on our website to the ICAD's website, but we don't keep a calendar of what other organizations are doing. Okay. So you'd have to go to ICAD's you can access it through our website.
Okay. And I just want to make sure people, it's artdeco_la.org.
No, that's actually our Instagram handle.
That's the Instagram. So artdecola.org.
Yes.
Is the website. On Facebook, it's Art Deco Society of Los Angeles. And Instagram is artdeco_LA, correct?
Yes. Okay. Because there are so many Art Deco societies around the world, we definitely always refer to ourselves as the Art Deco Society of Los Angeles, because we don't want there to be confusion. And that has happened where people are like, that event you're doing, we're like, that's not us.
Does that happen a lot?
From time to time.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat about this monumental time in history for Art Deco and for Art Deco Society of LA. I just love being a part of the organization and being able to meet you, and I've been able to meet some of the other folks that volunteer their time and have the same enthusiasm and passion for preservation and education. You had brought that up earlier about how important that is. And I think having opportunities like this to talk about it contributes to education and educating people on the importance of the movement. Your stewardship is much appreciated. It is not easy, and it takes a village. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having us as a spotlight on your podcast. And for you, a film lover, we are going to mount an Art Deco Film Festival this summer. So you can keep an eye out for that too. And everything we do is both educational and fun. So we try to combine the two because I think it's a better way to learn is to experience. And like you said, to be in a room with other people that care about the same things and can bring their passion to the forefront. And whether that's cars or jewelry or clothes or whatever it is, we all maybe start to learn something that we didn't know about before, and then it becomes our passion too.
It's like being a child again. It's that moment of discovery, and you never really outgrow that.
True.
I want to also thank all of our podcast listeners and viewers. This conversation will be in both audio and visual. And thank you for joining Some Like It Classic. I want to be sure to follow us on Instagram at Like It Classic and on Facebook at Some Like It Classic. You can find our podcasts on all of your favorite streaming services. There's iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, Spreakers, all that good stuff. I'm your host, Tammy Govea, and this is Some Like It Classic. Until we meet again.